and review and approval of the minutes of 2/5/21. Anybody have any comments?
I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
And I will second.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor? Jay, you want to call the roll?
Yep. Let's see. Just going across here. Marvin,
Yes, in favor.
Alan,
Approve.
Dave,
Aye, approved.
Peter,
Approve.
and Rick.
Approved.
Excellent. Okay.
Great
Just
start.
one comment, if I could. I want to comment to Doreen. She did a great job with the minutes. So just want to make that stated.
Great. Thank you. Actually, we received an email to that effect from Don earlier this morning as well. So appreciate it.
Kudos.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Those meetings are off. The notes are great. And you do scheduling too, I understand, in addition to meeting notes, so.
All right, item 2 is review comp plan edits. So where are we going to start?
Yeah, so let's see. Karen and I were just talking about this a little bit. So if you remember, we had sort of a batch left from the last meeting, and then we sent you a few new things for this meeting. I think the thing I would like to start with, just because I think it's really right up there among the most important, is we proposed some changes to the vision statements based on the discussion. So I think I'd like to start with that, and then we can sort of get back into the flow of where we were, if that makes sense to folks.
Okay.
And
Page
I will
16.
pull that up here. I think I will anyway. Let's see. Okay, I got that there. And share. All right. You seeing my screen, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So let's see. The first thing we heard was about Vision 1 and how, yes, generally the marsh is, something that the town recognizes and is central to our identity, but there's also lots of other important natural resources that felt were being maybe not as well highlighted. So we've attempted to restate the vision while keeping the same vision, if you will, but with different language. So as you can see, this is intended to replace. I was trying to do a strike through and underline, but working in PDF, it just doesn't work. So I've just sort of decided I'll just rewrite it. So I guess with that, be interested in folks' comments. Are we heading in the right direction? Is this what folks were thinking in terms of highlighting those other natural features as well?
I think your changes are good. Minor comment, capitalized towns in the 4th bullet. I think everywhere else in the plan, town is a defined term, capital T. Otherwise, looks good.
Yeah, and I think it reflects. I think Don made the comment at the last meeting about wanting to make sure that we include discussion of the beaches and the other types of open spaces that we have. I think this does a really good job of capturing that while retaining that first phrase. The marsh is central to the town's identity. So I like the changes. I think they're quite good.
Hi, this is Rachel. Speaking as the grammar police. I would suggest that you break up that first sentence and either put a period after resources in your corrections there, and a capital T for therefore, or put a colon, because it really is two complete sentences. I also have a suggestion on as the grammar police. A suggestion on the first sentence of the core vision and strategy statements, and that is eliminate the, it is understood that sometimes we all just need the highlights. Well, because it is understood, we don't need to put it in there. So is it easy and quick read? This section provides some of the high level, and just put it that way. And I delete the concept, the word high in the second paragraph, last line, the quality of life of all residents.
Can you restate that last one, Rachel? Sorry.
Sure. Let me see the second paragraph from the top.
Yep.
The natural environment improve upon the quality of life of all residents.
And with that in mind, I don't think you need the upon. It
Arguably,
just
there are
improves
people
the
who
quality
would
of
like to
life.
have a high quality.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we are instead moving to improve the quality for all.
Yep.
I agree with the grammar policewoman.
Very good. And then, as you can see, we also just did a little bit of language tweak in the fourth bullet down here about the economic and supporting businesses, using the word businesses rather than companies, and felt that the verbiage, that blend seemed a little odd, so we just modified that as well. So are we generally satisfied with these? Sort of taking silence to mean that, or?
All agreed, yeah.
All right, great. Very good. Let's see. What are we going to jump to next here? Do we want to go, Karen, what were we saying we want to do next? Is that where we jump to the economic data, or are we
Sure.
going to jump somewhere else?
It's up to the group if you want to go through all the text edits and then do the economic section at the end, or we can start with that and then do the rest. Does anybody have a deep?
I would suggest that staff lead the way.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So why don't we? Oh, Dave.
Well, I was thinking, why don't we finish what we had kind of started, just to get that
Great.
done,
All right.
on consent.
Okay.
Oops. Hang on. Sorry, I'm opening. Clicked on the wrong thing, so I'm going to try to bring up what we had from last meeting. Here's what we had left from last meeting. All right, so we had gotten through a number of items, and so this is where we had left off, was page 105. Actually, I'm gonna just jump for a minute here and open up. One of the things that we heard, so we heard this with the first draft of the plan, and now we've heard it with the second draft of the plan. People had, if you remember the first draft of the plan, we had, I'll step back further. If you remember, going back to when we started the RFP process, one of the interests and pieces that we had in there was to develop these master plans for Oak Hill and Dunstan. And that was one of the pieces that I think we were excited for when this project got started. This is one where, I mean, to be frank, we did not get, I just needed to be sure I'm still recording. Okay, I am. We didn't get delivered what we had anticipated. If folks, again, I'm sort of just bringing people up to speed. Remember, coming out of Planapalooza, our primary consultant had done a lot of work doing some drafting in revisioning Oak Hill and Dunstan. And the comment that came from the community and from this committee, and what we reflected back to the consultant, you know, sort of our debrief of Planapalooza, was that those illustrations felt canned, that they really didn't do what we wanted them to do. As the plan developed, they sort of articulated those a little further. And we had both a Dunstan plan and an Oak Hill plan, that sort of picked up on these themes, but essentially wound up in a drawing similar to this. The Dunstan one really caused a lot of concern in town. It showed Route 1 going down to 2 lanes and just things that were just so outside of the context and the norms of what we could possibly expect that we said, you know what, let's strip that thing out. There were also concerns that were flagged as part of that first round of review around this illustration as well. If you remember, and it was echoed again, it's the notion that it doesn't, there's sort of people's homes that are eviscerated. There's sort of these issues. And so, and I know we talked about it and said, man, how can we deal with this? And one of the things that I think we talked about is really what are these plans bringing, or what's this now one plan bringing to the comprehensive plan at this point, where these notions of sort of mixed uses and interconnected streets and the built environment are really captured in many other places in the plan. It almost has become redundant. And while this was intended to be sort of the articulation of what that meant, it seems to be causing maybe more heartburn than the benefit it's providing. So question, or what we might have talked about is, are these pages truly still necessary?
Jay,
be interested
Jay?
in those thoughts on that.
Jay, I just received a message from Allison Bristol that the public link's not working. And she's wondering if someone could send her a phone number or something.
Okay.
You want me to take care of that, Jay? I don't
Yeah,
mind.
if you could. Yeah, thank you, Jamel.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jamel. Sorry, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'll start on that one, Jay, if any people don't mind. I guess the more I think about it, I think the hypothetical at Hannaford is not necessary. I think the kind of the generic little studies, the ideas are good, but and it's fun for planning geeks all around and design people. But I think for the general public, it's too far out there, and you're like you say, it causes too much strife. So I guess in my perspective, it's unneeded going forward.
If we were starting with a blank piece of paper, that would probably not be a bad idea, but we're not.
And I think the other thing I remind us of is there is somewhere else in the plan, and I could pull it up, there is sort of a piece where they, again, capture this notion and reimagine sort of the Oak Hill Plaza that sort of shows in a much more confined area, in a commercial area, sort of what could happen. And it, and obviously the owners of Oak Hill Plaza have seen this plan and haven't sort of raised ire or concern about it. So I do think, like I said, I really, as I read through this and was, sort of saying, okay, that's the concern. Well, what is this really adding at this point? That's
right. I also think that the fact that the Downs has progressed the way it has, in some ways, makes this sort of redundant or unnecessary, because the Downs was a situation where there was basically a blank page. And people have seen how that's sort of come together, and some of those quote unquote town center concepts that are part of that vision. But yeah, I agree with you and others and I certainly heard some of those comments a year or two ago, people saying, wait a minute, that's my property, that's my business. Not to mention people stressing out about seeing Route 1 crunched down to 2 lanes. So I agree, not really necessary.
Okay, my 2 cents worth is I had noted that I thought this was superfluous. And some of the development behind Hannaford's is already in the works. And people psychologically look at this and say, well, yeah, I know it's supposed to be just a concept, but that's my house. And there's a psychological factor here that damages people's perspective of what's trying to happen. So my 2 cents worth would be to eliminate. We're already past this. since then.
I certainly would defer to the people who have a great deal more experience than I do. My only thought, listening to the immediate discussion about this, factoring in no history of my own, particularly, other than very general, my only suggestion, if it were desired to keep this for any reason, would be, could it be retitled as purely conjecture, as some sort of idea that brings something to the comprehensive plan as far as it is concerned, as far as future planning, as one of us, I think Dave said, for planning geeks or that sort of thing. I'm just wondering whether or not it could be retitled, conceptualized in a way that would be palatable to even those whose houses are incorporated into to this idea. And it's only a suggestion.
And I think, Marvin, to that point, that was one of the things we talked about during the public forum and have mentioned to the residents that, this is, as you just said, only intended to be conceptual. There's, no plans to actually develop this. It's just trying to show planning concepts. But I think we still heard from those property owners that we hear that, I understand what you're saying, but it's still my house, and one can understand that.
Well, absolutely.
Yep.
And with that, Jay, I would concur with my fellow committee members as far as finding it superfluous. Thank you.
The one point I'd make, Jay, and I'm broadly in agreement with everybody on this one, because my thought was that this is more of an implementation type of discussion rather than a long-range planning document type of material. So it gets to a level of detail that I wouldn't expect to see in a long-range comprehensive plan. I'd expect to see this in a master planning document for a given set of properties. But it is one of the more tangible examples or tangible pieces we have in the document that allows people to physically understand what some of the concepts we have around the town center. And I don't remember if it was Dave or Corey. Maybe there's something we could include about the current status or the current diagramming of the downs, which is still somewhat of a blank slate, but would allow us to show some of the concepts it's almost as a pedagogical tool within the document. But I think the Oak Hill, because it affects so much, it's already there, and it will draw too many unnecessary questions of, hey, that's my store or that's my house. I think dropping this is the right thing to do.
If possible, what Peter suggested about incorporating aspects of the downs in this way, I think is a great suggestion.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same ways. If we could somehow transfer these concepts to I know there's a charter or there's a committee for the Downs Center. And by the time this gets out, their work will be done, but it would be nice to see them consider these kind of concepts as they go forward with the Downs Center committee work.
So we can certainly make these pages available to them so they can at least, as you said, see concepts, planning concepts, right? That these notions. Yep.
It sounds like we're in agreement.
Yep. Okay. All right. If I don't hear anything else, I'm going to close this one for now. Which actually, no, I don't want to do this. I want to stop doing that. So sort of brings us back to, that sort of changes the conversation around page 105 and 106, because those are really the introduction pages to what we just decided to take out. So I don't know that we really need to go through the fine tuning of these. However, what I will reference, let me bring up 106 as well. Is again, these concepts are embedded elsewhere in the plan. And so what I'll just do is, as we go through, is see where we might be able to use some of this language to bolster where else is spoken about under sort of, it's in that community, neighborhood and community design chapter. But otherwise, I think these pages also wind up coming out.
Okay.
So with that, what does that bring us to? All right. 116, what do we do here?
Just gonna jump in quick. I did send Allison the link, but I don't see her logging in. So I'll keep trying, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Jamel. And Jamel, actually, could you change your name to the, you know how you can do, to the phone number to dial into? Maybe that way, if she's able to, sounds like she's seeing us, or maybe not, I don't know. At least if someone's on YouTube, they might be able to see that and pull it up.
She asked for a phone number to dial in.
So thanks, Jamel. Okay, let's see, page 116. This is sort of getting to that villages conversation we had before about how villages are each village is different. So here we're just talking about how some villages have opportunities for added integration of various uses. Based on the comments we've heard at the last meeting, maybe we want to even include a language that says some villages excluding Higgins Beach have, but you don't know what folks' thoughts are there.
Hey, Jay, I had a nit here on this one. This one is a pet peeve of mine, but
Sure.
Can we get a stock photo that's of a town in Maine? This is downtown Franklin, Tennessee, and that is State Route 31 that goes north and south in Tennessee. So can we, this is where the consultancy was located. So could we do that, please?
I'm with Don on that one. And it comes up on a number of other photos that we'll go through today too. But yeah, this one was kind of, I ended up going on Google Maps to find it and it was kind of entertaining, but yeah.
It's a great town. I mean, it's a lovely downtown, but it's not us. It's not Maine.
Yep. Yeah, that's something that Karen's working on throughout the plan, as you just said, Peter.
Jay, in terms of this page, I would prefer that you leave it as the some villages and not
Yep.
spell out any particular one.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah, and we've cleaned up language elsewhere about villages, obviously. So this is sort of a tangential, or not tangential, but just a piece where we're trying to pick up the themes that were more echoed on prior pages or stated. Okay. What do we do here? All right. So let's see, this is getting back to the sort of the issues of pace of growth and intensity of growth. And one of the questions we heard is, well, what does intensity mean? So intended to try to capture what intensity of development means as opposed to density. Really the sort of utilization of the land more so than how much can fit on the land. And then again, another statement about monitoring the impacts of growth and why we might want to do that.
Jay, the only thing is it's a subtle distinction, but I think the intensity of development is not necessarily intended to mean increasing density, because I think in some cases it will involve increasing density. But it's just the idea that it's not a direct result. It's just, I don't want people to think that increased utilization will always maintain the existing density footprint.
That's a good point, Peter.
And Jay, this is a question for you. I don't know that much about planning. I'm not a technical expert in the area like all you folks, but I think I heard you say before, somebody say that doesn't intensity also have to do with the number of uses, like the number of types of permitted uses? I don't know if I have that right, but is that
it can, but not necessarily. It's really about sort of whatever uses are permitted, how much impact they have on the land area. So I think one of the examples that we used, and I think might have been, I can't remember what workshop it was where we talked about this. But if you think of an example of a 10-acre lot that can have 1 unit per acre, you could have 10 1-acre lots, or you could have 1 10-unit building on 1 acre, and therefore 9 acres are undeveloped. So that's just a quick idea of what this is trying to capture. So again, and you could insert, rather than dwellings in that comment, grocery stores or pharmacy, any use. So.
Does it make sense to have some sort of a definition of the difference between density and intensity? That comes up all the time.
I suppose
and people get confused.
Yep, that's I suppose what I was trying to do here with identifying what intensity means, because density does have a fairly common term, but I'm happy to add some language.
But I'm just saying some sort of a little bullet that says, this is the difference between density and intensity. If you can do it like a little box thing or something, yeah.
Yeah.
People get confused by that all the time.
And it's a pretty important concept as we talk about what happens in the villages versus the centers,
right.
Downs.
Right.
I agree. It's a pretty important concept.
Okay. That generally unanimous on that idea?
That's good.
Okay. We satisfied with this page? Okay. Again, getting back to our ideas of villages, just talking about smaller centers may provide a mix, because there are all sorts of different smaller centers. So that was it on that page. I'm going to take silence to mean that we're we're good.
Looks good.
Okay. What did we do here? Again, this is where we're trying to get to this issue of pace of growth, or actually the impacts of growth. I'm sorry. So the X shows where this language would be added. And so we're now just talking about how the town must periodically review its policies, ordinances, and standards to ensure there are no impediments to desired types of development, including impact fees, growth management ordinance, and traffic reports. Just
Jay,
highlighting what we're doing.
The grammar police here.
Yep.
I would change the location of that insert. So
Okay.
instead, the sentence reads, the town must periodically review its policies, ordinances, and standards, comma, including impact fees, growth management ordinance, and traffic reports, comma, to ensure there are no impediments to desired types of development.
So I'm moving it to after the word ordinances, right?
Yeah.
and this is kind of a grammar comment or kind of a meaning content, to ensure that there are no impediments. Presumably, we will still have some impediments for good reason. No impediments is a bit strong.
Could it be few impediments?
Few, yeah. I think I think Rachel, that make that'd be much better. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Because like no impediments implies you wouldn't even need a license. Just start digging.
And Jay, I think the insert is after standards, not after ordinances. Just,
Yeah, right.
Oh,
standard.
yep, yep, thank you. I was,
Sorry.
thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm moving on in the silence. Happy to go back anytime we ought to. Here we go. Here's just another tip of the hat and identification of we want to manage the pace of growth in town. So pretty subtle language change,
Done.
but captures the notion that we had previously not talked about. So. All right. Can you read those tiny words? Let me see if I can get a little closer here. All right, so what are we saying here? So most people who work in Scarborough do not live in town, which in many instances may be because they cannot afford to. Yeah, I think this was we sort of heard like, pretty definitive statement with, we haven't, which I think, yeah. So it's just sort of saying.
I think this is a good change. I would just say primarily which in many instances may be because they cannot afford to do so. I always hate ending a sentence with a to.
How about just making it most people who work in Scarborough do not live in town because they cannot afford to live here?
Do so.
Or afford the housing.
In many instances,
housing
I don't
cost.
think I'm not sure we have data to say it's because they can't afford to live here. I'm sure a lot of people want to live somewhere else.
Yeah, but that is a huge issue, is affordability for a wide swath of jobs that are available in town.
No, I agree with you, Jean Marie. It's
So how do we? I'm just trying to make the English better. Now I'm the English police.
The note I had said roughly, this is something we need to check the Karen's economic data to make sure that we're saying this accurately. Does the economic data support this? I mean, people may complain that they can't live in town. Does the data support that is a general condition?
Yes, and I think we can, when we look at the economic section, I think we can clarify that. So let's put a pen in that and talk about it when we talk about the economic section.
Yeah, and that then will give us a way to say this correctly.
Yeah, if it's factually true that the number one reason why people who work here don't live here is that they can't afford to, then let's just say it. I mean, that's just a statement of fact. So
Well, I think that was the comment, is we haven't done that. That would require a dedicated study to that purpose,
Right.
where
Yeah.
I think, a lot of this is coming from, we can see the data and we have the conversations to hear folks' concerns, but yes, we haven't done a housing study that says, okay, what's the primary reason people who work here can't live here? So I think that was the sort of comment we heard was, hey, this is a very definitive statement that you can't back up by study, by singular studies. So this is where, again, the language is now intending to just soften that, still understanding the concept that, to Jean Marie's point, that, we still want to flag the concept that we know there's a lot of people who would like to live in town and just simply cannot afford to.
Right.
That's Now,
Let's
can I
not forget the
point to-
fact-
Can I point to a singular study and say that's, so that's where this language is trying to just soften that approach.
Let's not forget the fact that many of the people who actually drive through town on a regular daily basis do not live in town and they're driving to work someplace else. I think it's rare that you will find that the majority of people actually live in the town where they work. Most people drive to work. And so I don't know how hung up we need to get on this language. I mean, to me, it just seems like we're trying to dig too deep into this issue.
And just to be clear, I just got a sentence on it too.
I think we should be promoting that though, in order to as one small effort to minimize traffic, we should be highlighting and trying to promote that people should work closer to where they live.
Right. And just clarification, so in our data, what the data shows is that the percentage of people who live and work in Scarborough has actually grown significantly compared to other communities, where about, I think, 33% of people who live and work in the community. And I think that's up from, we'll have to look at it when we see the economic section. I think that's up from 24% in 2010. So going in the right direction in terms of living and working, but yes, some 76 to 77% of the people who work in Scarborough don't live here. Or no, that's not right. Sorry, 77% of the people who live in Scarborough work elsewhere.
And it's also true that a lot of people pass through.
Yes.
I don't know how to quantify that though. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just want to be clear. I just didn't want the sentence to end on a 2. But I think Dave raises a good point. There's sort of other layers here that about the idea that part of this comprehensive plan includes some concepts like we have people live closer to where they work, and that would involve all strata of folks, including folks who would need affordable housing. So there is a message there maybe that we don't want to lose, but yeah, I don't want to belabor the point.
If we're done with that, I think we need to change something about the Carpenter Court subdivision. Is that not already built out and all of the houses sold?
Right, so the tents, yeah.
Yeah, it's the tents. It basically, we built it. It was very successful and it is fully occupied.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yep.
Going back to the highlighted area, and forgive my ignorance, please. It is the town's intent to encourage that more people who work here live here. That's the question? That's what I'm gathering. And where in the comprehensive plan does it state that, if I'm understanding that correctly? And is this a place to state that fact? If that's a fact.
I think the main policy we're trying to get at is to provide for housing choice. And by that, I mean diversity of housing stock and affordability. Then people can choose where they wish to live. So whether they work and live in the same town, that's, people can make that choice on their own. But the broader, or I think the bigger policy issue is enabling that choice for those who wish to make it. And so I think that's what the comp plan focuses more on than sort of saying, hey, the town really wants to make a concerted effort to have those who work here live here. Let's be sure that that choice is available to people. But
I think some of this was aimed at and is still aimed at workforce housing for folks like teachers, firefighters, police, those people who work in the town. For instance, I'm aware of a teacher who actually left private business to become a teacher, and he has found he can no longer afford his house in Scarborough, and so he's moving to Lewiston. He teaches online classes, and that's I think was part of the original discussion, that the housing affordability pointed in a couple of directions. One, as I said, for those people who work for the town, who would like to live here, and also for seniors who would like to find a place to downsize to that they can afford, where they can remain living in Scarborough. I think those were two of the populations that came to mind during some discussions.
I appreciate that, Mike. I think the only thought I have is if it's the town's desire to encourage affordability for people in order to live here who work here, if that's a sentence that makes sense, why not say it? For example, the only other suggestion I have, and I certainly respect that we're digging in too far into this, but instead of most people, I might suggest many people, which softens it a little bit. I think the language you're creating here is dancing around an issue. And instead of dancing around it, why not state it? If you want to, if the town wants to encourage affordability of housing in order to create an atmosphere where people such as teachers, et cetera, can live where they work, why not say it? That's my own, and I figured you were not saying it here because somewhere else in the comprehensive plan, I missed it. And that was stated categorically. And otherwise, if it's not something that the town feels as though they want to encourage specifically, I don't see any need to dance around it either. So those are my 2 cents. I'd be very interested if anybody has any response to that.
I think it's been a long running goal of the towns to increase affordability, at least in some pockets. And I agree with you, Marvin, that it should be stated, if we can get that incorporated into one of the next steps without making this too voluminous, and I'd concur.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Dave, you probably have a good idea. Maybe we add some explicit language on the next steps side of this page, because I agree, Marvin. I think I took a pretty good read of the plan. I didn't see that bold, or that not bold, but that definitive a statement elsewhere, and this feels like it might be the right place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll look for if that's interest of I've heard at least 3 folks have that interest. We can try to find language or try to find an area in this somewhere in the plan to make that statement, whether it's right here or some other location, but we'll weave that in. Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right, what are we doing here? Again, this is getting to the pace of development. So just adding the word. So the type, location, pattern, add the word pace and intensity of development envisioned throughout the community directly affect the amount of wealth anticipated for the town. And current language, monitoring conditions, comma, the pace of development, comma, and planning for different scenarios in the future will help Scarborough stay in good path of long-term financial stability.
I would just eliminate the and.
Yeah, or say additionally.
This,
But,
this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What page is this? This is. Okay. Let's see. Yep, so another growth management statement.
I think we said capitalize T in towns.
Yep.
And one thing I'd say is I'm not sure the growth management ordinance is monitored. I think the impact of the town's growth management ordinance is monitored. And then the ordinance is reviewed.
So reviewed.
Yeah, and Jay, change the apostrophe in towns, TOWN apostrophe S. I'm on a roll with grammar and punctuation here.
I don't think you need the two after should either. Or you
Okay.
should say should be to monitor.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're going to reviewed.
Yeah.
Okay. Good, thank you. All right, last one of the first batch. Again, another statement about the pace of growth and just really changing this around public safety.
Yeah, I had a bit of a problem with this. We just built a $20 million public safety building. So having in here a statement that we're going to be building new stations and that sort of thing, I don't think is what we want to do. And this is a little bit of a bugaboo of mine, but, and there's no need that the services we're going to have to keep track of services as we grow. But this to me seemed to be a very direct commitment that, was written before we built the $22 million public safety building. And frankly, I know that the landscape is changing. We have a greater need for dispatch. We have a greater need for EMS and other services, some more social services, for example, helping the homeless and so forth. So I thought this was, A, not appropriate, and B, maybe overstated. So, but that's just a pet peeve.
On that, Don, this one that Karen and I chatted about, I think in see what this does to further the conversation, because I think one of the things that the plan talks about earlier in the plan is this isn't so much about the central fire station, which is what we all typically think of these days, because it's the big, but earlier in the plan, it talks about how there's capacity issues in the Dunstan Fire Station, and there's discussion in the sort of state of affairs about the potential for working with SACO because SACO
Right.
has needs. There's also discussion about the North Scarborough Fire Station and the issues there, and then again working with the other towns. And so maybe we can sort of rephrase, because I agree. Where most of our minds are is to the big shiny building right next to where I am. And so this might be one of those areas where we could sort of refer back to that section that says, hey, there might be these other ancillary facilities, or I don't even know if ancillary is the right word, but so
I hear you. I think your point is there are different approaches to how to solve for this. Building more stations or expanding the ones we have in different areas may not be the way to do it. So That's my question. And I just felt making a commitment like this, people will go back and say, it said we were going to build these. So I'm not sure we want to do that without having, pretty full and robust discussion about the need publicly.
Actually,
So
Jay-
Don,
Karen.
sorry, go ahead.
I actually echoed Don's comment. I was actually sort of surprised to see this. And that's also in the context of the other discussions, Jay, because the other discussions were more conceptual and talking about cooperative programs with other communities and things like that. This was a much more definitive statement about construction, especially when you're talking about we're going to have make sure they have internal sprinkler systems. We already, in theory, have an idea that there's going to be a building, therefore. So yeah, just the language in here didn't mesh well with the more conceptual conversation about how public services and public safety services need to be available for the development needs of the community in general. So I agree with Don. This language didn't mesh for me with what I think is intended.
So if I could I just want to sort of restate one thing, Peter, you just said. So where it talks about the sprinkler systems, that's actually a different action from this step.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
This is about the interest of the fire department had put into the early consideration about having a townwide policy to require residential buildings that are being built in town to have sprinklers. And so I just so I can understand what we're trying to change, because the next step really talks about studying the need for it. Does, so I just want to know what language
So
that I'm
Jay,
missing, because again, I've been too close to this, so help me understand the language I'm missing that explicitly says we need to build them, where it sort of talks about studying the need for.
I just want to make one suggestion that may address a part of Don's issue. We may want to consider in the title, starting there, change improve to ensure, because that's really what we're trying. I think that's what this section is about, is ensuring that public safety services keep pace with future growth. So that's the premise of this. So instead of saying improve, let's just say ensure, because that's the first piece. And then, the next steps could be softened to talk about studying how public safety, what are the mechanisms that can be used to ensure that public safety services keep pace with future growth.
Yeah, I agree with the wording changes Karen's suggesting. The thing is, we're getting into a lot of detail here in one very specific area. There are questions about whether or not that's the right strategy. And we're already making a very detailed written commitment about what that means. And it ties back to the prior discussion, the one on 147, that talks in general about the GMO requirement that we ensure that we're able as a town to keep pace with providing services that are caused by growth and development. And I don't know the exact wording, but there is exact wording in the GMO that refers to our ability to keep pace with the cost of services. And those include not only public safety services, but also infrastructure, other investments, including things like education. So that I think is sort of the issue that needs to be brought out in the, in the plan. And rather than a specific commitment like this, for example, for public safety. So I know this is sort of a, it's getting into a longer conversation, but I think we need to get that right.
Hey, Corey.
Yeah, speaking of specific commitments, and I agree with a lot of what Don said. I mean, I think, for example, I think people would take issue if there were the perception that there was sort of a categorical commitment to building new school buildings in this document.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to qualify that and make sure that's couched properly. The other thing, it's more of a specific comment, is it's sort of on the theme of having really specific commitments in here, or it's something that could be perceived that way, is the sentence about requiring all new residential buildings to have internal sprinkler systems. that's a huge policy change and something that's been controversial in the past. And I can understand that the fire department may have that position, but for us to state that sort of as a sort of consensus goal of the town and sort of have that buried in there, to me, is problematic. There are implications for affordability, and I think we all agree on the importance of fire safety, but requiring that all residential buildings, including single-family homes, have sprinkler systems is a giant leap. And so, I don't know that we necessarily want to have that in there.
The one thing I will say is that, having been in the life safety business, that is a move across many places now, that new residential homes have sprinkler systems, towns surrounding us have that as their code as well.
As a realtor, I'll tell you, all HE double hockey sticks will break out if you have this in the absolutely. Sprinkler systems save lives. They also add $30,000 to $40,000 to the cost of building a house. The realtors will be all over you. South Portland right now has got something in front of their town council, and it's created a firestorm over there. I know Gorham's had it for a while. I agree that, to me, it should not be in this document. If that's something that the town council wants to deal with at some point, but I don't see that being in this document. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm not taking a position against sprinklers, certainly, but I agree with Jean Marie that I just don't think it's appropriate to have it in this document, because then it sort of becomes, or at least could be interpreted as, a de facto policy change. And it doesn't seem like the appropriate way to do something like that.
It seems like we're writing town code in the comprehensive plan, and that's not the intention of the comprehensive plan.
Or promoting it, right. My thoughts were we state that we want to understand the implications.
Mhm.
It either comes out, or we study it to understand the implications of that policy, But it's a huge leap from the construction industry.
Yeah, I think, this certainly was, I think has been noted, language that came from the fire chief when we were originally writing this. And I think if the interest of the committee is to soften that language, to talk about sort of study approaches or what have you, because I know, again, the chief has interest. I think there's been local communities, as you said, have recently, more recently than this, adopted public safety impact fees. And I know that the chief has some interest around that idea, but we can sort of put that into a more, a higher level comment than the specific comment, which I think is the same thing, Don, getting back to your facilities. Not so explicit. I did see over here where we do say, I was trying to find, I was like, all right, we're saying study. Well, what? And then right over here though, is I think, we say will require investment in land buildings, right? And that's sort of the issue you were flagging, is it is very definitive. So I'm hearing Karen and I can and should do a lot of work on softening this section quite a bit.
Get the word should out of there.
Yep.
I think when you're doing that work, it would be helpful to give a nod to the fact that the town has built the new public safety building. And that is whatever the impact that's having in terms of the ability of the public safety to consolidate services.
I think you're in an area where the words again matter. And I agree with you, Jay. I think that word require is too strong. And regarding the sprinkler system, I don't know if this modifies it enough for those who are in favor of striking it altogether, if I'm not putting words in others' mouths or ideas. But consideration may be given to some such thing as that versus require, and perhaps certainly all new buildings should be equipped, should be modified. I agree. If not eliminated.
I think it should be taken out. Again, from a town council point of view, it's a policy statement that councils want to make
I agree.
down the line. I mean, to me, it doesn't even fit in there.
I agree. It seems out of place. I thought it literally referred to new fire department buildings, in which case it maybe had a place, but I don't think this has this statement doesn't belong in a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I also concur with the idea of mentioning the new building as an example of the considerations that have been given and are suggested in this section. Is a good idea.
I agree all around.
Okay. So Jane, I can check back with the chiefs and see if we can find better language for talking about, really how we assess the impact of growth on public safety. So we'll check in with them on language too.
You.
Okay, do some further work on that one. All right.
All right.
I think that gets us through last meeting. Let's see. So we've already talked about the vision. So yeah, let's jump in. Karen, let's do the economic piece, and then we have just another 3 or 4 after that. So.
Okay, or do you want to do the 3 or 4 and get through that? We've only got 3 pages.
I've got this up.
Okay, great. All right. So back to our goal of updating the economic data. We did demographics last time, and there are a couple of revisions based on some comments that Rachel made. So those are done. But this is the dynamics of the economy. And what we're really doing is updating from 2016 to 2019, which is in general the latest data available for everything. What I decided to do when I did this update is we've got sort of the general trends over the last 9 to 10 years. And then we have COVID. And so one of the things I'm doing is saying, let's, the piece that's not in here is what's happened based on the impacts of COVID. And I'm working on a sort of a 1-page call out that says, hey, we're looking at a longer trend here. Now we've got 2020, which is hopefully an anomaly, and we'll call that out and talk about what we know about COVID sort of all together and say, these are the things that we need to, watch out for. But we just don't have all the data from 2020 in, so we couldn't mesh it with everything that we had here, but we also can't ignore it. So that's the one piece you don't have is the COVID impacts, but that's coming. So this takes a look at job growth, the wage and salary employment, really, again, updating the components of the economy to 2019, did a little update on entrepreneurship based on the data sets that we were using to look at entrepreneurship. I did add occupations, which we hadn't really talked about in the last piece, but I did add the section on where people are working, what types of occupations they're in. So that's there. We've talked about unemployment. That's updated. The educational attainment is updated. Commuting to work and where people worked, and I added a section about how many of our Scarborough residents travel into Portland to work. By the way, that is going down from 2010. And we've got the basically the sales have been updated. And then the piece that I think I want to go back to is looking at that last piece of this, which is the housing sales. And so I could use definitely some feedback on there based on our previous discussion. I think we can add a few things. The difference when I updated the data, what I've found is that the median household income that is reported by the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau really is keep matching at this point. Even with the new sales numbers, the median household income is close to the purchase price, even with the 2020 numbers. So, because we're at 94,000 for the median income. But I think what that does is just say, okay, well, all the people who are moving in and buying houses, we know that their incomes are high. And so, yeah, the people who live here can afford the median household income. What that doesn't talk about is what we were referring to in the previous section, which is what about the workers and the whole host of jobs that are in Scarborough. How many of those jobs have incomes that could afford a $480,000 house, which is the sales price? So we can go back and do some of that. And I might, Jean Marie, I might want to talk to you offline about, a couple of things that we could add in here to strengthen really this affordability piece, if that's the desire of the group.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. What about the rest of the group? Do you think we should go back and look at the types of jobs that are here in Scarborough and their average wages, and then look at that gap? Or what's your feeling?
Karen, one thing that would be interesting to me is to view the change in the composition of employment. Because that might be telling if we're becoming primarily a community of management consultants and all the fishermen and teachers are moving out. That would be telling, and some trend data on that might be helpful. It's what you've got up on the screen right now. I'm not sure how to do that, but that might be something.
Yep.
And Peter, along those lines, I would like to see something about demographic shifting too, because younger people can't afford to live here.
Yeah,
I run into it frequently with first-time home buyers. They'd love to live in Scarborough, but they can't afford it.
Yep.
So they're moving to Wyndham or wherever. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I like all of these ideas. I think there are a lot of assumptions that people make out there about affordability in Scarborough, and this is an opportunity to see what's actually out there, what's true, and to point to potential gaps that we might want to think about how would be addressed in terms of housing stock from now on. And Karen, I'll offline, I'll send you a couple of little grammatical errors.
Sure.
And sometime over a beer if you want, when we actually can do that. On page 11, if you notice the average annual employment, that there is a spelling mistake there. Wage and salary jobs located in Scarborough.
Look at that.
I'll tell you about a spelling mistake, a similar spelling mistake I made, and 500 faculty members didn't notice.
I've looked at this chart so many times, and I know I did not see that.
That's because they're not detail people, Rachel. Come on.
Yes, but as I said, it's a good story over a beer.
Excellent.
And Karen, I had some other things too, that a lot of them are small edits, but I did have one or two questions I want to mention. And I can send these to you separately in an email, so I don't want to take up a lot of time. But there were some things in there, like we talk about, non-employer companies. So, is that the same as self-employed or owner operator? There's some other kind of, technical questions I had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That is I think a confusing section. So I think, yes, I can clarify some of that.
Yeah,
Great.
Don,
So
I picked up the same thing, and I was going to ask those questions as well.
Right.
Great.
I'll do a quick definition. Non-employer, self-employed is the person who actually works for themselves, but they don't have any wage and salary employment. So there are a lot of people who have companies, but they're the sole employer. They're the only person, and they're not paying wage and salary. So that was the difference. And there's a huge
Where does that come from? What data service is that from?
Yeah, that is, there's two sources. There's the economic census, and then actually the American Community Survey has some data on that as well. So, but we'll clarify that.
Okay.
Karen, this is just purely selfish question. As an independent contractor, real estate brokers are a weird bunch because we're affiliated with companies, but yet we're self-employed. And I know there are a number of us living here in Scarborough. Just out of curiosity, where do we get captured? Do you know?
You would not be in the wage and salary employment because you're if you're a contract worker, or if you're self-employed.
Right.
And
so where do we?
The same like the stylists. I think I mentioned in there. Maybe I should use real estate agents, but stylists are a perfect example. Most of those in the big salons are renting their booths, but
they're
so
independent
they're not
contractors, right?
Yeah. So a commercial fishermen also fall under that.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
I have a question about housing sales, and I'm way out of my depth here, but Scarborough, because it's ringed on one side by the ocean, has all of these very expensive homes. And our median sales price, or the cost of housing generally, a median price of a house in Scarborough, skewed toward a higher end because of all of those very expensive shore properties? And if so, is there any data out there that, and I don't know if you can even do this technically, but is there data out there that removes all of those from an equation? So when you're talking about affordable housing, we're not talking about second homes or third homes on the ocean in Scarborough?
Okay, I'm sorry. I can
No,
answer
go ahead,
that. There's not a huge volume of turnover with those higher end houses to affect the median as much as you might think. That being said, I mean, it's a good question, but I think, and again, I just talk from my own experience being in the field and being out there all the time and watching and tracking numbers, that, that median number is actually good. And it's actually it's low in my opinion, but there you go. But I'm not sure, because I know I get my data from the Maine Association of Realtors. And that does not include private sales unless private sales are reported to us in some way. Or as a realtor, I do a private sale. In other words, I bring a buyer, say to someone who's selling their house without use of a broker, and then I put it into the statistical information. But unless that happens, they're not necessarily getting captured either. So it's a good question though, Marvin. But that's just my 2 cents worth on it.
I realize the assessed value of real estate is low. Is there any data out there about all of the assessed values of the various properties in Scarborough and a median assessed value of property?
There is, and we can pull that back in. And I have a vague recollection that the assessing data actually does have a separate category for oceanfront housing. So let me look at the assessing data. Last I checked the assessing data for the, and remember we're talking two different things. There's all housing in Scarborough, and then there's the housing that's for sale. So two different, that median of all the, which is the reported value of all housing, is going to be lower than that sales price. But we can bring both of those things back in and add them to this section.
I guess I would have some concern about trying to distinguish between the average or median price of homes at a high end, and where's the break point, and the average or median sales price of all other homes. I mean, the number is what it is.
Right.
And I really don't, I mean, putting aside sort of, what do I want to say? Distinguishing between upper end and lower end, it's just, it is what it is. And I don't see the point in trying to distinguish between the two types of homes. And plus, I don't know where the cutoff would be. So I wouldn't be in favor of trying to make that distinction in this document.
And I do think that the median is intended to help do that rather than looking at the mean or the average, right? That's why we look at a median, so you don't get thrown off by those things. And I do think Jean Marie raises a really good point. Unlike many other coastal communities along in Maine, we have a huge land area, that goes all the way out to, as is lovingly referred to, Buxton Fourside. So I think there's, to Jean Marie's point, there are a lot of data or a lot of things that are happening away from the coast that, even if we look at averages, help to mollify or smooth that out. But the median is really the driver. So
And that's why realtors use median as opposed to average when we give statistics, because of the skewing that can occur otherwise.
Yep. I think this was in an earlier version or was in a prior plan, and I think it needs to be in there, especially given what's happening with the bubble that's occurring now, with the driving up the mean and the median, for housing, sales prices, that sort of thing. So I think it'd be valuable to put it in. I think it's a good discussion.
Great. Okay, I'll work with Jean Marie and to flesh this out a little bit more and look at where we can make some comparisons to the demographics as well.
And I think just one final comment on that too. We mentioned sort of the trend line in the occupations of people, of residents in town, how that's changed, how that is changing over time. I'm not sure how it is, but how it is. And I think there was also a comment about potentially having some median salary or average salary information or earnings data for some of those categories. Again, I think it's important to know whether we're becoming more like Greenwich, Connecticut, or whether we're maintaining the profile that Scarborough has had since I was a kid. So I think that trend data on both sides would be important.
Okay.
anything else on this one? We have three others to go through, and that should get us to about our 9:30 time frame.
Great.
Are we all set here?
Mm-hmm.
Hearing none. There they are. All right, we did that one. So let's see. So here there was sort of been commentary about just enhancing what we mean about welcoming around social and cultural issues. So wanted to flag that, and this seemed like a good place to weave that in. And I know we've included other demographics in Karen's prior work that we looked at when we did the looking at demographic stuff, added some additional about social and cultural differences in the community as well. So,
Jay, could you explain to me why the bottom one is be bold instead of simply bold? Since we talk about engaged, connected, vibrant. Then be bold is an exhortation.
Yep,
Yep.
good
Just
point.
been be bold all along. So, why other than this is what our consultants originally came up with and were, embedded in the original plan, we can make it just bold if we want.
More consistent.
I think that actually came out at one of the town meetings very early on.
Yeah, it came out of Planapalooza, these
Mhm.
bits. But
And by the way, page 92, you got a spelling mistake.
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Okay.
So we like the concept of just being bold, not be bold.
The only comment I'd say, if it came out of the Planapalooza and people liked it there, do we want to take it away? But I take Rachel's point. It's kind of odd.
Yeah, and I would just, this has been a bugaboo for me too. I hear a lot of complaints about it. But it is, it is something that came out of the exercise. When we use Planapalooza and the trademark in there, can we just drop Planapalooza? I don't really feel we need to kind of keep referring to that as an advertisement, but I'm open to be persuaded. But I think we got what we need from it, and we're working it hard into final form. But that's just kind of an individual.
Well, it was essentially a charrette, and that's what it was. So
Yeah.
we can call
Yeah,
it.
I think I'd rather use the generic than the trademark, thing. But that's not my call. It's just
Don,
an
thanks for
opinion.
bringing that up, because that actually bothers me too. The use of that trademark term consistently feels like we're now advertising, and that doesn't feel good in a comprehensive plan. If we say it once because we did employ a specific technique, fine.
Mhm.
But it's just, I'm a little uncomfortable with that as well.
Yeah, and if the term is trademarked and you use the term, then you have to put the note that's trademarked, the TM next to the word,
Yeah.
and use it.
Yeah, but we could use that generic word charrette, and
Right.
and we'd be fine.
Can you do a global search and replace?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. There you go, Rachel. There's your 92. Let's see here. I think this came out of,
Yeah,
just sort of looking at,
go down to the red, the next to the last line, sharing could, COULD.
Yep.
Yep. Instead of DL.
Yep. Otherwise, good. Okay.
I had a question, Jay. When you say under the existing revenue sources, the local revenue structure is a function of the area's applicable state law. What do you mean by that?
Oh, are you right over here in this first paragraph?
Yep.
I'd have to ask others who have more experience in our financing. I'd have to, let's see. So local revenue structure is a function of areas.
Say the area, when you say the area's applicable state law,
Gotcha.
is that a town, a county, just Scarborough, the state, and what?
I read areas not as a location, but I think it means provisions of state law is how I read that word, areas. But
It could be changed. The local revenue
Yep.
structure is a function of state law, size.
Yeah, I would do that.
So just delete of the
Yep.
areas applicable.
Yeah.
Sorry, leave the of.
Yeah.
Is a function
Again-
of state law.
as I mentioned at the last meeting, we are GPCOG. Once we make our changes, which I think we're really close to sending along and getting done here, GP Cog's going to do a full copy edit review of this. But certainly these are, it's good to pick up as many as we can before we send it along to them. But we're going to see a very different document in the end here. Good, thank you. Okay. I think there was one more. So yeah, again, sort of in the area of redundancy and sort of what's going on there, pages 66 and 67 are sort of they're a little bit convoluted and sort of seem like a square peg round hole, and it that was sort of flagged in our discussions, and it seemed like some of the concepts that were on page 66 and 67 really are picked up in this section, and then with a little bit of additional language really captures whatever was in 66 and 67 that wasn't captured here, sort of folds it in. Also folding in the concept that we heard at one of the public forums about ADA accessibility not being identified really throughout the plan, and sort of being sure that we're clear on that. I mean, even though it's a federal requirement and we do it with all our town plans, we want to be sure we're recognizing that we continue to do that sort of stuff. So that was the idea. So that will, again, eliminate a few pages and make it a little bit of a quicker read.
And you can correct the spelling for accommodate in the red text at the bottom.
Yep. And Jay, this was one of the ones that came up. This is a lovely picture of South Portland looking over the Casco Bay Bridge, but it is South Portland, not Scarborough.
Yep.
Maybe we can get a picture of the Eastern Trail or something.
Bike paths. Yep.
Certainly. So, okay with the concept laid out here? Okay. I believe we've done what we came here to do. Certainly there's still, whoops, what did I just do? Sorry. You know, we're still obviously working on a few things, and I think we have our next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks, so we'll have another round of items, but I think we've really hit on a number of the more significant things that came out of the public forums. I think we've really touched on them, and hopefully members of the public and council at least can recognize what was done and continue the discussion based on that. Yeah, we'll keep working and send you a few more edits. We do have a host of sort of other edits that are really minor edits that we're not, you know, that we're just going to embed into the plan, and they're not policy issues at all. So we're not going to overload you with those. So that's what I have for our portion of the agenda, Dave.
Okay. We have any, want to throw it out there for public comment? I see Allison did make it in.
Yep, she was able to make it in. And I'm not seeing a hand go up as of yet. So, oh, there we go. Hang on. All right, Allison, there you go.
Thank you and good morning. And I'm sorry I was unable to hear about the first half of the meeting. I did have one quick question as a follow-up to the discussion last week. In looking at the plan that's been published, that is currently published online, the conservation and growth map on page 100 and 101, I'm just trying to understand the intent of the key in that it appears that the heading says conservation and growth map, and then there are 6 growth areas, which are low to moderate density non-residential, low to moderate density residential, corridor transformation, village, regional activity center, and community activity center. And then the rest of the town is keyed as a limited growth areas, conservation and open space, and rural residential. So what I'm trying to fully understand is So are we basically saying that every area of town is a growth area?
So let's see. So these are really break down in the same way. The state requires that you identify growth and low growth areas. And these, so the growth areas and the limited growth areas identified on this plan are the same that are identified in the 2006 plan. And sort of the differential being within sort of a couple of different things. This pertains to our growth management ordinance, which allows the town to do a differential in terms of the number of permits that are allowed. You're allowed to do a differential in terms of the number of permits that can be issued in the limited growth areas as opposed to the growth areas. Therefore, you can sort of slow growth even further in those limited growth areas. It also gets to areas of, and this is one of the things that I've actually been talking with our consultants at GPCOG to help with the language a little bit. Growth areas also really indicate where the town can make infrastructure improvements and investments. And so Allison, I think, obviously you've raised Higgins Beach as an area of interest in the past, so I'll use that as an example. The sidewalk improvements that the town did a number of years ago would be an example of an investment that would be made in an area that's identified as a growth area, as opposed to maybe somewhere it's identified as a limited growth area. So really, I think one of the things we need to do a better job of articulating is that a growth area doesn't just mean more growth as we might typically think about it, as lay people would think about it, right? Growth means more buildings, more development, more residential and commercial development, but it also means sort of targeted investment areas. And I think that's some of what might help also further refine the discussion. We've obviously, as we talked about, amended some of the language around villages and how they're each unique, and doesn't mean that they're all going to get rezoned to be higher densities or intensities or what have you. But so does that somewhat help?
Yeah, it does help. And Jay, maybe you and I can have an offline conversation, to fully understand, because not to take everyone's time, but I think that the way that the growth is expressed throughout the comprehensive plan, not just the description of villages, sort of doesn't imply that. It implies, building development and non-residential growth. So maybe we can have an offline conversation so I can really fully understand it, because I know it's not just myself, it's a number of my neighbors that are, also concerned.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get into the next few pages that then describe further what it means about low to moderate density residential and non-residential, and sort of break down then what those different sectors mean, that just because they're identified as growth area, all under this growth area umbrella, doesn't mean they all have very different future. There's different categories of growth areas, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway, yes, happy to have that conversation with you, Allison.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay. Last
Dave,
closing word?
Dave or Jay, just one, we're not meeting next week because I think we agreed we would take a week off for school holidays and other things. Are we going to have another turn of the InDesign document then in 2 weeks' time, Jay, do you think? Or what do you think it will look like in 2 weeks?
I don't know if we'll have an InDesign. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Karen, I don't know exactly, Peter.
That's fine.
Yep.
Jay, I had a quick question about the conversation you were just having with Allison, in which you said that there was a chance that the word growth could be better fleshed out so that it is understood not to mean what colloquially we think it means. Is there someplace in the document where growth is defined in terms of how it's really being applied when it's referred to here?
Yeah, I don't think we do sort of reference it in terms of what the state statute, we reference the state statute very early in this document, that, hey, we're doing this, but I don't think we sort of say, look, the state requires that we have growth in low growth areas. And I think what we've tried to do is say, look, all these different categories, I'm not sharing anymore, all these different categories that fall under the low growth umbrella, under the growth umbrella, have very different meanings, that just, our community activity center, regional activity centers, Downs, Oak Hill, Dunstan, that's really where we're trying to direct most of our growth. Those are, but these low to moderate density residential, low mod density non-residential areas are, while they're growth areas, they have very different meanings. So
I think we can go back and use the lexicon of the state with respect to the term growth, and that may help clarify some issues, because it's about investment as well as the layout of growth.
And I don't know if growth, I'm sure it's not an isolated situation where a word has very specific meaning. A glossary of terms as an idea.
Yep. I think today we've talked about a number of things that would be helped out with definitions. So we can certainly come back and do that. The discussion with intensity, the definition of growth.
Call out boxes might be, because, I think we try to get into a glossary of terms. Well, which terms are, do we need to find, sort of where do you start, where do you end? But I think to the point earlier, let's do a call out box. When we come across these very obvious ones, intensity and density, growth and limited growth areas, or say, this is, when we're using these terms, this is how the state is looking at it. And really don't worry so much for locally about the idea of growth area, worry more about the category you're in, right? Are you in a low mod density non-residential, low mod density? I think that for local perspective is sort of the more pressing item, if you will. But I do think that's clearly an area that could be fleshed out and defined better.
Great, thank you.
Okay, anybody motion to last minute? Want to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
See everyone in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, folks.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.